All right, let's get underway here. Let's see. We're taking a look at Ephro's hand. He's got a pair of Gruul Spellbreakers and a Llanowar Elves. I'm in.
Yeah,
Ship it.
Ephro's hand is perfect, and luckily for Andrew, he's got a shock to prevent Ephro from really getting things out of control. But look at just the difference in size of creatures, right?
Yeah.
Andrew's gonna have
versus
to
two twos.
Andrew's gonna have to use these removal spells to deal with things like Llanowar Elves and Legion Warboss, and then we're gonna have 4/4s facing its Adelises, and it doesn't. Wizards get smashed by big creatures.
Yeah, well, so does Izzards, and this does look like a tough one here for Andrew Cuneo. He has drawn a Wizard's Retort, so he could opt to keep that up, but he's decided to go for Adeliz to Cinderwind and just start getting in there. I mean, this deck does play fairly assertively. He can't really sit back forever.
And as a legend, a redundant copy of Adeliz in Andrew's hand means that, even if that first Adeliz were to fall to a removal spell, he's got it back up, so he's incentivized to just start committing them to the board.
Now, Eric just had a decision between Gruul Spellbreaker and Legion Warboss. What's the... How do you make that decision?
Traditionally, when you have these cards like Legion Warboss that have really strong into the battlefield abilities that are weak if they get killed right away, you want to get that incidental value out of them and then force your opponent to use the removal spell. So I like the sequencing by Ephro.
Which, by the way, is exactly what just happened as you said it, so great job. Eric runs the oops out there.
I love a good oops.
Yeah, I love a good oops too. And he's going to put Gruul Spellbreaker on the stack now. Of course, that has Riot and Trample, so it presents either an immediate threat or a bigger one down the line. That's going to earn a Wizard's Retort here from Cuneo. So he's hanging right in there. Though, as we see, next turn, even with no draw step from Eric, he can play Gruul Spellbreaker, followed up by the Immortal Sun after that. The question is, how's his life total looking? And he is taking hits from Adeliz here.
He is taking hits. This would have been a huge turn for Andrew to have been able to add another Wizard to the board. He really wants to get something out there before the Immortal Sun starts to take the game over. So
it's pronounced Wizard, but
oh, excuse me.
Respect the game.
Yeah, one of the issues with Cuneo's deck, it's not really good at catching up from behind. He wants to be on the front foot, and he's also not that good at mitigating mana flood. So he needs to draw some action.
So, by the way, Eric, recognizing that this has become a bit of a damage race at this point, he plays the Gruul Spellbreaker and opts to just give it haste rather than the +1/+1 counter and get in right now.
Mm-hmm. And I think here we're kind of seeing maybe one of the flaws in Andrew's deck in the sense that he doesn't have that many creatures to go with Adeliz and Nahrameha, and this Immortal Sun is just looking really, really powerful because he's just not under that much pressure.
Also, look at that draw step there from Eric. He drew Rekindling Phoenix for the turn, and it looks like he's going to cast it here because he just would have run out the Immortal Sun in the first main phase otherwise.
Yeah, and for anyone who's ever played Dominaria Limited, you've definitely said go a lot of times to Adeliz and just died on the spot. So maybe Andrew, Eric kind of fearing that.
Wow, now he can chain together Rekindling Phoenixes, or if he'd like, he can just run out the Immortal Sun right now as well. This one has truly fallen away from Cuneo as Eric has hit that big part of his curve, 4-drop into a 6-drop, and there's really not much that Cuneo can do from this point, especially with that hand. He draws a pair of lands to go with that redundant Adeliz the Cinderwind in his hand, and that is game number 1. Going to the Gruul Smash.
Yeah, and Andrew's deck, again, we talked about the lands involved. He has really Chart a Course as his way to mitigate flood, and with 7 lands there, that his curve stops at 4. So 3 of those lands were really functionally useless for him. Turn those into creatures, much different game.
Wow, this looks like some nice sideboard options here from Frolic as well. He gets those Immortal Suns out of there. He doesn't even want them. Vivian Reed comes in. Mm-hmm. That looks nice against this deck.
Yeah, and you see him, maxing out on Lava Coil, Lightning Strike, and Shock. As we mentioned, I think a lot of the ways in which Andrew's deck looks the most impressive is when he gets to untap with Adeliz and additional wizards on the battlefield. So Eric's first priority is to make sure that doesn't happen, and I think Eric correctly having a lot of low curve countermeasures for Adeliz Cinderwind.
Yeah, really impressive look here from Frolic. Look at that. He put in Sark on the Masterless as well.
And we had speculated that maybe he'd go into Sark in the Masterless. And sometimes when you're playing a mid-range deck and you load up on removal, you want to have a little bit of that top end to make sure you can close out and don't just sit there with a bunch of removal spells in your hand.
Yeah, he's been able to change around his curve significantly here, and it looks decidedly to his advantage. Let's see if Cuneo can fight back. He is going to be on the play here, of course, and maybe can get out to one of those quick starts that you get sometimes from a tempo deck like Wizards or I guess Izzards. Land go from both players here to kick things off, though. And is there a 2-drop? There's an Augur of Bolas there for Cuneo.
And that's a good 2-drop for him. You know, it's going to require an answer in the form of Lightning Strike or Lava Coil if, you know, Andrew can find one of his ways to buff it, and it also kind of helps him tear through his deck.
Do you feel like maybe the hand overlay's not quite updating? Do you see that, Paul?
Yeah, it looks like, yeah, I
a
think
little
that
out of-
Andrew's hand might be a little bit behind.
Yeah, so let's not, we'll just ignore that for now just so it gets less confusing and focus down on Eric Froehlich's side. And let's see what he's working with here. Well, yeah, he's got a nice bit of options here. The Augur of Bolas, of course, applying a little bit of pressure to Eric's life total, but nothing too bad, just 1 damage a turn.
And this is one of those spots when you're playing a deck like Gruul Midrange, you see blue, blue, blue open. You're thinking, okay, there's a bunch of counter spells my opponent can have, but can you play around it necessarily? Wow, look at Eric. This is why he's a Hall of Famer, you know?
This is Eric, man. He knows what's up. Are you going to counter this? Nope. Mana Wells resolves, and now he can just pass the turn back with both Shock and Lightning Strike available. He could even attack if he really wants.
And this is just deduction, you know, that Ifro is using here. Andrew has chosen to do nothing on his 3rd turn. If he had Adeliz, he probably plays it. If he had additional creatures, he probably plays them. So his hand probably has counter magic or removal in it. And so in both of those cases, keeping the Rekindling Phoenix for later makes some sense. So, and maybe things are a little bit different if he has the extra mana for Skargan Hellkite next turn, because then he needs to fight through all the counter spells anyway. But as it is, I think that I like the way that Eric sequenced this.
Well, Eric's going to clear the way with his Lightning Strike. He's not going to leave that mana fallow. He's going to send this Augur of Bolas to the bin. So he used up 3 of his 4 possible mana that turn and played around the counter spell. But here it is, God Eternal Kefnet on the stack now for Andrew Cuneo. And that could be a big problem here for Eric, because he's going to have to use 2 removal spells just to get rid of it, and then it can just come back anyway. Said he's just going to fight. He says, all right, fine, I'll make a 5/5 flyer there. Now just hope that Andrew doesn't hit a bunch of spells off the top of his library, and everything will be fine. That's Eric's game plan. Yep. Although, did he hit? He did. He hit Opt. So he gets to play that. No discount, unfortunately, since Opt only costs 1 mana, but free's nice.
Yeah.
Free copy of Opt there for Cuneo.
And in this situation where God Eternal Kefnet giving Cuneo a sense of inevitability, that the longer it stays on the battlefield, the better it is. But, you know, Ifro might just play dragons. Yeah.
So now Eric probably going to start just bashing, right?
Probably just going to start bashing, although it does run into the possibility of you know, Andrew combining his God Eternal Kefnet with a removal spell to take out the Hellkite. But I think that given how Hellkite flooded Ifro is right now, he might be okay with that.
Not the worst place to be.
And this is a tough spot for Andrew. You know, it's, you know, a situation where normally when you're playing a control deck and you get out an element like God Eternal Kefnet, you just are trying to survive and you're okay taking a few hits, a few, you know, chunk bits of damage, because later in the game you'll find some incidental life gain to get yourself back into it after you're up 1,000,000 cards, you know, so much card economy that your opponent's buried. Here, Andrew doesn't have that luxury. He's playing a blue-red deck, similar to what we talked about with the Pra earlier. So that means that Andrew's going to both need to turn the corner and stabilize and not die to kind of incidental burn spells that finish him off.
I mentioned it before, but Cuneo's hand is not currently synced up with what we're seeing on our main screen there. So just to avoid confusion, I've just been ignoring it.
Mm-hmm.
Here's Adeliz's Cinderwind now.
And that's a great piece of advice, just ignoring kind of Andrew's what's on the face, ignore what's going on, and then look what's behind the message. I think it's a great way to deal with Andrew Cuneo.
As a human?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I was told on multiple calls with our producers, well, Andrew has requested that we call his deck Izzards. And I'm like, do you know Andrew Cuneo? You do not want to give him this level of power over us. He will immediately abuse it, I promise.
Yeah, I mean, as many people know, he once won a eating contest by eating mayonnaise, so the man is capable of a lot.
Yeah, he has a very wide range. But we went with it. It's Izzards. He got his way.
Yeah, so we're looking at Andrew digging here a little bit. He wants to try to get Adelise's toughness up over 4 to force Ifro to use an additional removal spell in combination with his lava coil and really, gain a huge tempo advantage.
Let's see if he's able to do so. Yeah.
Wow. We're really seeing the power of God Eternal Kefnet here. It's
Seriously.
just, you play against it in limited, it's obviously amazing, but when you pack your deck filled with spells like Andrew does, it just looks absolutely broken. And once again, we see God Eternal Kefnet, not even a main deck card, a 1-of in the sideboard. Wow.
And there's that shock to get Adelise's toughness just that much higher. Now, Eric does have a way to fight back, it seems.
Yeah, but the tempo of this turn is just gigantic.
He's just falling so far behind and also using up significant amount of cards to make this work. So Adelise's toughness is now down to 1, and Eric is going to go ahead and use Skargan Hellkite to finish off Adelise. Now that Andrew's completely tapped out, he knows that this will work, and he even gets off an incidental 1 point of damage upstairs and then gets to hit for 5. So big hits coming in now from Eric Froelich. Sure, that was a big setback for him, but still, the end of that turn ended up looking pretty good. And now we're going to see Wizard's Lightning drawn off the top of the library fresh, so God Eternal Kefnet will allow a Lightning Bolt, a straight up Lightning Bolt there, and then he's actually going to use Reckless Rage there to finish off the Skargan Hellkite rather than the Wizard's Lightning that Eric now knows about in hand. And boom, coming in for 4. Wow. And Eric's life total is getting very low here as well. He is dead to the cards that we know.
This is as good as I've seen God Eternal Kefnet ever be in a game of Magic.
Seriously.
I think, it's
just
drawn,
hit every time.
It's drawn him a bunch of cards, it's provided removal, it's made sure that he hasn't missed land drops, and it's also beating down at the same time. So kind of a one God wrecking crew.
Yeah, I like that. That works for me.
And Eric gonna try to rely on Rekindling Phoenix to keep him alive here, which, putatively could do so for 1 turn, but that's, imagining that Andrew's 3 hidden cards are all blanks. Which, as we now see, they are not.
They are not. And that is, of course, Reckless Rage. And in combination with Wizard's Lightning, should get the job done here for Cuneo. Wow. Boy, I got to say, looking back now to earlier in the game after Cuneo resolved God Eternal Kefnet, and there's that game going to Cuneo. What a harbinger of death it was to reveal the opt the first time, because that's what let him chain, your turn Kefnet shenanigans, and then he also set it up probably to do it on his turn as well. And that just led to multiple turns in a row, including Eric's, where Cuneo was able to kind of go off.
For 4 mana, he got about 16 damage, drew about 6 cards, killed all of Ifro's creatures.
Would you pay 4 mana?
And it wasn't vulnerable in addition to all of those things.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Well, okay. God Eternal Kefnet. Welcome to the club. That was pretty nice. Now we're going to go into sideboarding here. And again, it looks like our upper graphic is not in sync, but these are recorded, so just we'll just have to ignore it, I think.
Most of what Ifro's doing is around the edges. There's no way that you want kind of Growth Chamber card in against a deck with Shocks and Lightning Strikes and the Immortal Sun. We talked about how weak it is. What you want to do with these, 5 and 4 drops, that's really the question. We see him, a little uncertainty as to how many Sarkins versus Skargan Hellkites. What's the most effective tool?
And let's not forget here, this is a big match in this division. This is the Pearl division, and this is Eric with only 1 loss on his record, and Cuneo with 2. But with a loss here in this game, this is game number 3, the decider, Cuneo probably is going to get knocked out if he loses. And if he were to lose, Eric would put himself in a fantastic position to lock up that day. Now, if the reverse happens, then Cunio's going to even things up and make it really interesting down the stretch in Pearl. So there's a lot riding in this division here on this game right now. Eric's going to be on the play with no one drop. He's just going to play a tap Stomping Ground and pass the turn back to Cunio, who's going to play an untapped Steam Vents and then pass, signaling a shock perhaps to Froelich. But it won't work out here for Cunio. He's going to have to just settle for taking 2 damage and drawing his card for the next turn because he didn't have anything else to do with his mana anyway.
I wonder if Andrew may have been a little bit leveled there, you know, by playing the untapped Steam Vents into Ephro's 2 mana. Ephro has taken the Growth Chamber Guardians out of his deck, so it's really his turn 2 play would most likely be Paradise Druid there, which you can't even shock. So
Legion Warboss onto an empty board here, though, for Eric Froelich says, okay, you got to have an answer for this. Now, the red decks typically do, and that is the case here as well, as Cunio has Shock in his hand already. So he's going to kick things off by playing Chart a Course. For a little value, he's going to get rid of a redundant copy of Naru Meha, it looks like, and then he's going to shock the Legion Warboss. But we go back to what you said before. Eric's got a bit of value here. He's left with the token on the battlefield.
Mm-hmm. And Andrew, you know, a little narrow Meha flooded right now,
Yeah,
as I have never been. Yeah, and this is the thing where Andrew's deck is just, it's not giving him exactly the right sequence of cards here. And if you look at how well Ephro's hand is kind of sequenced here, this turn he'll be able to commit 2 threats to the board, and then that's going to make, you know, kind of lean on Andrew to provide answers and then potentially provide a window for that Skargan Hellkite. So, you know, Andrew's got his work cut out for him to get back in this thing. He really needs to get on the board early with one of those creatures. We saw how much better his deck is when it gets a creature out early.
That's right. The Adeliz Cinderwind doing great work in game number 1. But here in game number 3, Eric gets to use up all of his mana. He's decided not to give his Gruul Spellbreaker haste and leave it at 3 toughness to play around cards like, well, Wizard's Lightning, which is what's in hand here for Cunio. So smart play there from Eric. And he's just going to go ahead and jam because his play for the turn is another Skargan Hellkite. And he's going to force the issue here. And it looks like Andrew may run out Naru Meha. Naru does, of course, have Flash, and she's a 3/3, so he could eat up that Llanowar Elves.
Elephant Ambush for some of our old school players here who played in Odyssey.
There you go.
This is a nice interaction here from Andrew's deck and some of the ways he can kind of do some interesting things. So he'll be able to eat the Llanowar Elves here. Going to take a big chunk hit here, but depending on how much work this Chart a Course could do, could get himself back into this game. The problem is, again, we've talked about this before, the toughness on some of Ephro's creatures do not lend themselves to getting killed by burn spells very effectively.
And I mean, there's a nice sequence here if you're Cunio that you could hope for, which is, okay, eat your Llanowar Elves, take 4. You don't do anything super impressive. I get to untap, use Shivan Fire to kill your Spellbreaker, and I've got you down to just the 1/1. Unfortunately, Eric Froelich is going to throw a bit of a wrench in the works by playing a Skargan Hellkite, which now has 5 toughness and is a major problem here for Cunio. So he is really facing a tough situation here, and he's going to have to start to opt to find his way out of it. Well, there's God Eternal Kefnet. We saw what that could do last game. Is it too late here? It's a good answer for the Spellbreaker. And it looks like he's just going to have to combine 2 burn spells to get rid of this Skargan Hellkite right here and right now, Paul.
Yeah, I think smart play. You know, you just can't let your opponent untap with that creature. If they've put the +1/+1 counter on it with Riot, the ability is too brutal and the size is too brutal. So.
Okay. Well, this is a nice turn then from Cunio. Yes, he had to 2-for-1 himself to get rid of a threat, but he needed to. And he attacked with Naru Meha and got full value off of Chart a Course, so he got that card back anyway. And now, not a great follow-up here for Froelich, just the 2/1 and the 1/1, Llanowar Elves and a Paradise Druid before passing it back. What did he draw?
He drew Reckless Rage, which is absolutely incredible. It's going to allow him to double spell this turn, play God Eternal Kefnet, and take the Spellbreaker off the board. An absolutely gigantic turn of events.
That's exactly what Cunio needed to find off the top of the library, and now he went from being stable to ahead.
Yeah. He's at 6 though. You know, he's not out of the woods yet. But you know, if you're in Cunio's seat right now, you're thinking to myself, "Wow, I still have a lot of action left in my hand, including a counter spell to protect myself. If I can just untap here with my God Eternal Kefnet in play, I gotta love where I'm sitting."
So, Froelich draws Lava Coil for the turn. He has to take down Naru Meha, his only reasonable target for it, and just pass the turn back. So, this is the turn where Andrew Cunio has fully turned the corner on on Eric and needs to just press his advantage, and that's exactly what he's doing. God Eternal Kefnet into the red zone.
Yeah, God Eternal Kefnet.
Ooh.
What an all-star.
Chandra Fire Artisan off the top of the library, though, especially when you consider that Cunio's at 6 life. This could be interesting.
Yep, and certainly priced into casting Wizard's Retort right here.
Yeah.
And that put the shields down for Andrew now. So the next time Eric's able to draw something, it's likely to resolve.
Yeah, I wonder if that Dreadhorde Arcanist has great targets in the graveyard. We know about Chardacore sitting on top. There has to be a shock or something in there, right? I don't remember.
Another incredible hit.
Oh, was that a free Chardacourse?
A Chardacourse,
one
yeah.
mana Chardacourse?
Oh my gosh.
Goodness sakes.
I mean,
wow, God Eternal Kefnet has proven a total all-star in this match. Not even a wizard.
No, and look at this. I mean, he's going to be able to deal an incredible amount of damage this turn if he wants to, and really kind of wipe Ephro's board thanks to the combined power of God Eternal Kefnet and the Dreadhorde Arcanist. So, yeah, Andrew really in the driver's seat right now in terms of where he wants to be.
That one turn, he went from being behind to looking like he may stabilize to just fully swinging the game in his direction.
Mm-hmm. So far, my least favorite part of Izzards are the Wizards, and my favorite part is the Zombie God. That's the part that I'm liking a lot in this deck.
Yeah, I wonder how good this Dreadhorde Arcanist is. We still have yet to actually see it do its thing.
Paradise Druid makes things a little awkward here. You can't exactly wipe Ephro's board. You don't really want to get hit by that. But man, you still got to love Andrew's seat. There's just not that much that Ephro can draw in this situation.
So he's going to use a Lava Coil to take down one of the 1/1s because he's going to get a free shock off of the Dreadhorde Arcanist to take down the other one. And the damage is well and truly flowing here for Andrew Cunio. He's got the life totals evened up at 6 apiece. That is Gruul Spellbreaker off the top of the library.
Yeah, and unfortunately,
that's one short.
Andrew has it pretty well covered with the Wizard's Lightning in hand. Yeah. Even something like a Vivian Reed to temporarily deal with the God Eternal Kefnet wouldn't answer the Dreadhorde Arcanist that's on the battlefield. So, tough spot. I don't know if there's anything that Ephro can do to get himself out of this mess.
Yeah, these red-green decks kind of rely on having some burn spells laid. That's kind of their main way to do that, and they just don't have enough of them to make that game plan consistent. Otherwise, he's drawing. Yeah, I mean, Gruul Spellbreaker is a good Magic card. It's just not what he needs here.
One thing that we've seen over and over again, I think, in Standard is that there are certain cards you don't want to let your opponent to untap with and stay on the battlefield for multiple turns. And I think that Andrew proving here, God Eternal Kefnet definitely deserves to be along to Fairy and Experimental Frenzy in that group of cards that can just really get out of control.
I think Eric may just be giving up here. No, I'm wrong. He doesn't actually have lethal because it was opt Reckless Rage. He doesn't have a shock in his graveyard. Now, we saw that Wizard's Lightning in hand for Cunio means that he is going to win. But, you saw Eric check the graveyard there, and he didn't have it. So this is Andrew Cunio evening things up as far as the overall records go here in the Pearl division against Eric Froelich, and handing him his second loss while maintaining only 2 losses on his record. So very much, this is kind of what you signed up for. I think that's probably a mulligan, though. Very slow here. Incubation Druid on turn 2, and then you're not casting that Mass Manipulation for quite a while.
This is the kind of eternal question with ramp decks, right? You have lands, you've got ramp elements, and then you've got payoffs. And if you have all 3 of those things, you kind of have to just trust your deck that it's going to give you more of the right stuff. You know?
And it is interesting because this deck is absolutely exactly that. It is very polarized to cards that make mana and cards that you want to spend that mana on, and there's not really a lot of fluff in the middle. The only real mid-range cards are this Frilled Mystic that you see here, and then, of course, he has reload spells as well, some card draw options in the middle too.
And for anyone who's been playing, Standard over the last couple months, you notice that BBD has the kind of classic opening of a removal spell or piece of interaction into that absolutely brutal Thief of Sanity, and not a great way, for Lee to deal with it right now.
I mean, it's not game over, but Lee is going to need to find something very, very quickly to interact, and he doesn't have a lot to do it. His best option is Hydroid Krasis or to steal it with a Mass Manipulation.
And the thing with Thief of Sanity is that it cascades, so
yep.
He'll be able to start using Lee's cards against him. He also has Thought Erasure to protect his Thief of Sanity from something like Mass Manipulation or Entrancing Melody. And even if Lee's able to steal some of BBD's creatures, he can just return them to his own hand with Teferi Time Reveler. So tough spot.
Yeah, this is going to be really tough now for Li Shitian. Although Nissa Who Shakes the World is one of those potential game changers, though I have to mention here, Paul, he's actually gotten a little bit unlucky. He's drawn one forest so far, and this is the deck that takes advantage of Nissa's static ability better than any of the other decks.
Mm-hmm. So able to make 4 mana with it in addition to playing the Nissa this turn, but couldn't actually do it and cast Frilled Mystic or Mass Manipulation. So he's got to choose between playing Nissa, which is immediately going to be under pressure, or just going ahead and stealing one of BBD's creatures. But as we know, it's only going to be temporary.
Yeah, these creatures are going to be going back and forth like a ping pong ball here. Either Mass Manipulation, sending them back and forth, or as you mentioned, Teferi Time Raveler doing the same.
Really good discipline from BBD on his last turn to play the more cost-effective Elite Guard Mage, knowing that he has it sequenced so that his 5 mana can turn into both Teferi and Thought Erasure. So he's not really scared about this Mass Manipulation, and I think that shows his experience in the matchup.
It's going to work out beautifully for him. As he gets thrown a bit of a curveball here, he draws a Hero of Precinct 1. I still feel like Teferi plus Thought Erasure is pretty tempting for him, but let's see if he wants to say, you know what, I'd like some 1/1s on my side as well.
Really has the whole world in his hands right now.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, and the traditional play patterns to get out the Hero of Precinct 1 first, because obviously you start to make the tokens. In addition, he can use that Thought Erasure as a way to force a spell through Frilled Mystic when he really wants to resolve it. But my God, he has a lot of rare cards in his hand.
This one is starting to really fall apart here. Lee's slow opener is punishing him, and he's going to be able to cast Nissa Who Shakes the World, but she's not going to be able to get in even at Teferi at this point, and this is going to make his life very difficult. The good news for him is that he can play an island and still have Frilled Mystic available, and this will be a chump block here from BBD. So something.
Yep. Definitely. Unfortunately, Teferi is really shutting Frilled Mystic off here. So,
I forgot about Teferi.
Yeah, it's really. I think Lee's kind of going through that thought process too. Do I want to just tap everything and put out Frilled Mystic as a 3/2?
And there it is, plus from Teferi as well, as that little value train starts rolling ever upwards. But in the meantime, what you said a turn and a half ago there, Paul, is still true, which is that Nissa will find herself under pressure here pretty quickly from Elite Guard Mage, and then down the line that Thief of Sanity as well. And, well, there's Big Teferi as well. So this one is really starting to unravel now.
The beautiful way that he sequenced this means that he's going to be able to use the mana from Teferi's triggered ability to be able to cast the Spark to make sure that Nissa doesn't stay on the battlefield. And most of the ways that this Simic deck can really get out of control are when you untap with a Nissa in play. So wonderfully done by BBD.
Yeah, great stuff here from Brian Braun-Duin. And there's Mass Manipulation off the top of the library. Now, what does he have for mana? 1, 2, 3, 4. He can steal 2 things.
Mm-hmm.
That's a thing, right?
That's a thing. Yeah, you can grab both of those Teferis minus Teferi on something. BBD has done the right thing by making sure that he established a board presence in anticipation of something like this. So, but Lee's definitely not out of this game.
That was probably the worst case there for BBD. I mean, this is of course Mass Manipulation demands a lot of you, right? Blue plus extraordinarily high mana cost to be really great is tough, but it does reward you. I mean, this is a huge swing. Whoop! Both Teferi's jumping ship, and of course now he can use them as well because they didn't start the turn on his side. He's going to find Hydroid Krasis as well. This is getting interesting. Both of these Teferis are under threat here, though, as Elite Guard Mage plus Friends.
Little surprised you wouldn't untap his forest, which is a creature right now with Teferi.
I would have done that.
Yeah, as a blocker for some of these creatures. So
that was probably a misstep. I mean, he can't cast anything anyway from his hand, so having a blocker much preferable.
It looks like. Okay, this is interesting. So there's so many different options here for BBD, and they're all pretty good. his priority number one is to make sure that Lee doesn't untap with all of his planeswalkers on the battlefield.
Right.
His second priority is to probably use that thought erasure to, oh my gosh.
Yeah, so he's just going to use mass manipulation X equals 1 to steal back Teferi, Hero of Dominaria.
So that was
Now-
the card that Thief of Sanity hit during its one foray.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, he had that up. It's funny because, Arena will change the cost. So it looks, it's 4
I
and
see.
then XX. It's like, wait, what is going on with that? Well,
So 3 mass manipulations in the top 15 cards of Lee's deck.
and there goes Little T to the bin. And things looking once again beautiful for Brian Braun-Duin. And you mentioned this, Paul, but really impressed by his ability to set himself up for a disaster and still be able to recover from it. Now Teferi's at a very threatening 7 loyalty here. Just one more before we're in ultimate range. And, well, we've all seen how that goes. So are we just going to have to see a Hydroid Crisis here now from Lee?
I guess so, yeah. I mean, that's certainly the most powerful play that he can make by a large margin. And, it's a powerful play.
Yeah.
It just doesn't match up that well against either BBD's hand or board or play pattern. So,
His personality? Is there anything that it...
yeah, it's good against his personality.
All
It's,
right,
it's
all
not
right.
bad.
He'll be scared by it. All right, Hydroid Crisis trigger goes on the stack, and then the Crisis will resolve. It's a 6/6 Flampler flying with Trample. He finds an Incubation Druid, a Paradise Druid, and another copy of Hydroid Crisis, which, that is a play pattern that you can see, although here's kind of the big answer for it. Hostage Taker is going to hit the battlefield now for Brian Braun-Duin. Take care of that Hydroid Crisis once and for all.
And we see the weakness of a ramp deck like Lee's here. When you play a spell like Hydroid Crisis and draw a bunch of cards, if you put ramp creatures in your deck, you might accidentally draw them,
That's right.
and the problem is drawing them on turn 7 or 8 is usually not very effective when your opponent is getting ready to pop off an ultimate.
That's right. And by the way, that has become a very real possibility here as Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, is now on 8 loyalty. And with multiple blockers back here for Brian Braun-Duin, he's looking good to be able to fire off that ultimate next turn. And as I mentioned before, once the permanents start getting exiled, well, that's usually about all she wrote. BBD with the shields down currently, but an island off the top of the library for Li Shitian is not going to be good enough. Oh, and there's the nastiest in standard, right? Little T on the battlefield lets you cast your Thought Erasure at instant speed.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Yeah, that is one of the sweet interactions for now. I think at some point it's going to get pretty annoying. But that was, in fact, Li Shitian packing in. And I know it kind of looked like BBD conceded there, but no, that's just because we had it pulled down so we could see it from BBD's view. And that was, in fact, Li Shitian conceding game number 1. And Brian Braun-Duin is now up 1-0 in a matchup that looked great from here.
Yep. And so Lee is treating BBD post sideboard as a control deck, right? He wants to go up on Carnage Tyrant, but then he also fears Hero Precinct 1. He actually is going up on Entrancing Melody. So we see one of the real strengths, I think, of mid-range decks systemically. They're difficult to sideboard against because A, they have multiple different angles of attack, multiple different plans, multiple different types of answers, and then B, they have their own sideboard plans, some of which are just kind of tuning the deck, and then others are heavily transformational. So it really puts someone like, if you're in Lee's seat, it kind of puts you in a hurt locker in terms of what am I scared of? What is his draw going to look like? What are the actual threats? What matters? And it's not necessarily always obvious, even to the best players in the world.
So Lee's going to put in his 2 copies of Carnage Tyrant and his 4 copies of Negate, and he's going to cut Chemister's Insight as well as 2 of his Frilled Mystic and 1 of his Entrancing Melody here. Paul, kind of shaving a Frilled Mystic or 2 of those and an Entrancing Melody, and it looks like he's not interested in Chemister's Insight at this point.
It looks a little funky, right, to have Negate and Entrancing Melody in your deck, right?
Yeah.
You're thinking, are there small creatures the problem, or are they expensive spells? And BBD has a little bit of both, but Entrancing Melody maybe stealing a Thief of Sanity is one of the ways that he could potentially win this game. Although, man, it just seems to me like BBD is so well equipped to handle having his creatures taken.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the strength of the list that BBD brought to the table, right? You're thinking to yourself, okay, well, I lost to Teferi, but I could also easily lose to Thief of Sanity. It's kind of this awkward position that the deck puts you in. You have to answer multiple different types of things.
It's almost like the guy plays some standard. It's.
You think he thought about that?
I think
before?
he probably had a, you know.
We'll give him credit.
Yeah, he had a plan.
All right, so Lee's going to kick things off on the play here in game number 2 with a breeding pool. This time he has a pair of Incubation Druid plus Negate and Mass Manipulation, so off to the races here for Li Shitian. How does the hand look for BBD, though? Does he have ways to interact with this board?
He has everything. Yeah, he's
got it all.
Yeah, he's got multiple different options on turn 2, multiple different options on turn 3, and that Teferi Hero of Dominaria. The only thing he might be constrained by is he only has one more land. So, very defensive type of hand, very reactive hand for Lee.
Yeah, this looks great. A Hero of Precinct 1 off the top of the library, but he still just wants to play Thief, right? You can't be that greedy.
Hitting with Thief is so good, and because you have Little T, is that what we're calling it?
Little
Teferi
T.
Time Reveler. That means that just getting it stolen is just a bump in the road. It's just so temporary. So, man, there's really all of these plays look so good. Teferi Bounce your thing, Thief of Sanity.
Well, it's going to run out Little T, as we called him.
And I think this makes a lot of sense, both because you're getting the immediate value from Teferi, you're slowing your opponent down from ramping. Incubation Druid gets a lot worse as the game goes along, and really importantly, you're playing against a Frilled Mystic Negate deck. So having the static ability of Teferi Time Reveler on the battlefield is something that's going to pay dividends for BBD on turns 4 through 10.
Interesting here as well, off the top of the library for Li Shitian was another copy of Incubation Druid, and he didn't hesitate at all. He just slammed both of them on the battlefield. Even though he has 2 copies of Negate in his hand, he knows, well, those aren't going to be any good on this particular board state.
Right. Yeah, and
Teferi Time Raveler's so annoying when you're sitting there staring at 2 negates. It's just, ooh, there's a draw step. Oh no! Thought Erasure at instant speed. Wow. And look at this too. Brian Bronduin taking advantage of this interaction to the maximum.
Absolutely brutal. Yeah, it's just so brutal to have 2 negates in your hand, have your opponent cast Thought Erasure, and just be able to not sit there and do anything. So.
I mean, Arena let him see that he was going to top deck the card he wanted, but no, it was all for naught.
And how about the fact that despite having 6 mana, he does not have 4 blue yet?
Yeah, that is really, really tough. This deck has some needs a little work, I think. He is going to go ahead, though, and attack with Incubation Druid, and then before damage, fire off that Adapt, and that's going to kill Little T. Oh, Deputy of Detention for Brian Bronduin is going to take care of both of those. That is not funny, Becca. Don't laugh.
You know what? I saw BBD drawing on land, and I thought, wow, that's unlucky. And then your brain registers it a second longer, and it's like, okay, he tutored that basically to the top of the library.
Just 9 mana for underneath that Deputy of Detention now at this point. And there's Thief of Sanity with no answer for it. Still 2 more blue sources away for Mass Manipulation, and with 3 reactive spells in hand, this Thief of Sanity is going to run Roughshod. Yeah, really nice play there by BBD, not attacking with the Deputy.
Yeah, I mean, BBD is just playing perfectly. It's amazing to see. You have so many different options, and I think that's why players like him and Brad Nelson really value these mid-range decks. Every turn, you have so much agency over what you're doing, and you can sequence your spells however you want them to, not attacking into the obvious Frilled Mystic. I mean, it's just so brilliant. I mean, he's just playing well.
Yeah, and you saw no hesitation there. He already knew. He's way ahead of it. Thief of Sanity looks like it found a Llanowar Elves. Here's a Nissa who shakes the world. Nissa who's a little too late, maybe?
Yeah, I think,
It doesn't seem like...
It's interesting. It definitely...
it changes things a little.
It changes things a little bit. I mean, it's at least something that BBD is going to have to stop and take notice, and at least take some time off to use the Spark. But Negate now is turned on again, so...
the funny part is that Llanowar Elves is actually, somewhat useful here for BBD. He needs the mana, though the fact that it makes green is effectively colorless in his list.
Well, this turn it lets him do the double spell with Hero Precinct 1, which is super important, because, getting to make tokens is what's going to allow him to both pressure Nissa and block tokens from, animated lands from Lee. But
so what does he do here? Tyrant Scorn plus Hero?
Well, he knows about everything in Lee's hand, so that's the interesting thing. I think, interesting. Oh my gosh, he finds his own negate.
Oh, this is his Thief of Sanity look that we're looking at
now he's going to be able to dispark and back it up with Lee's negate. This is brutal.
Oh my goodness sakes.
And Lee had sequenced this kind of nicely, right? He has
did.
the untapped breeding pool, the negate to protect his Nissa, but he's gonna be hoisted by his own other negate right here.
This is so brutal. Wow. Brian Bronduin has been running and playing well here, and it is just tough to watch.
That's a lot of negates.
Yes, it is. By the way, the other one was in that pile as well, so that's all of them. And D-Spark is going to take care of the real threat that mattered, and we're back to kind of the fundamentals here, Paul, that you mentioned before, which is you're playing a ramp deck, and you have a hard time finding the things that you need when you need them. Llanowar Elves on turn 1 is one of the best plays you can make in the format. Here on turn 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever, much worse.
And what's really important about this sequence, this part of the game, with BBD being down to 6 life, is that BBD has perfect information about Lee's hand. So there's no risk of him accidentally playing into dying randomly. He's not going to just play as the Fairy Hero of Dominaria and get it negated. He's very likely to lead with the Hero Precinct 1. It's going to allow him to make additional chump blockers to make sure that he can continue leveraging this Thief of Sanity to run away with the game.
He found a Paradise Druid. He actually also found a copy of Nissa, but he decided he just wants the mana. And there's that Thief of Sanity after the Hero of Precinct 1, and that seems to be the death knell. I mean, normally in a deck that has cards like Mass Manipulation and Hydroid Krasis in it, you'd think, well, there's got to be some ways for him to come back, for Lee to come back, but it doesn't feel like that at this point.
Oh, what a great block, too. I was just thinking that this might be the time to double that breeding pool to get blue mana off the table. BBD is about 5 seconds ahead of me, as usual. These blocks are just absolutely perfect. And, when you're Lee, you just tap the table and say, well
nice
done,
hand.
sir. You brought a great deck and played great.
Yeah, it is interesting, too. I think we should mention this at this point, is normally those aren't blocks you'd want to make ever, right? You're not trading off your Thief of Sanity for their 3/2 on the board. Now, of course, BBD's life total is a factor here. He's down to 6. He needed to at least block one of those creatures. But what is leading him down that direction now?
Crucially, it's that he's not even going to be able to deploy all the cards in his hand before the end of this game is over with. So Materiel is not how he loses this game. It's life total. And specifically, constraining Lee's mana base by being able to block that breeding pool was also something that's very valuable to him.
Oh, God.